My name is Clara. I'm 28 years old. And for my entire life, my mother and sister treated me like the family scapegoat. I kept telling myself that if I just absorbed the blame and stayed quiet, I would eventually earn my place. But the moment that finally made the truth impossible to ignore came at my sister's engagement dinner. My mother tapped her glass, looked directly at the groom's parents, and told 112 guests that I was a thief. She stole $74,200 from my safe, she cried into the humming microphone. The ballroom went dead silent. I watched the groom's mother drop her silver fork against her china plate. My mother thought she had already won the room. She had no idea what was sitting on my phone. She didn't know I had installed a hidden camera in her bedroom 2 weeks earlier. And she definitely didn't know I had HD footage of my sister emptying that safe while my mother watched and laughed. What the groom did next left everyone speechless. Before I go on, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story speaks to you. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, let me take you back. My mother's name is Diane. She's the kind of woman who volunteers to bring the centerpieces to every event and then positions herself next to them for photographs. She is warm to strangers in a way she never quite managed with me. In public, she is generous. At home, she had a system. The system was simple. My sister Vanessa was the daughter she loved out loud. I was the daughter she kept around for what I could carry. I didn't understand that for a long time. When you grow up inside a dynamic like that, you spend years thinking the imbalance is your fault. You think if you could just be a little quieter, a little more useful, a little more agreeable, the warmth would eventually reach you too. So that's what I did. I made myself useful. I made myself agreeable. I made myself easy to carry things past. Vanessa is 3 years older than me. She's tall in the way my mother always wanted to be, and she has this quality of filling a room that I've never been able to compete with. Growing up, Vanessa was the one our mother dressed up, photographed, showed off to the neighbors. She was the one who got the bedroom redecorated when she turned 14. She was the one who got the car at 17, the gap year, the graduation party with a catered dinner. I got the hand-me-down furniture. I got the reused birthday cards with the old names scratched out. Not because there wasn't money. There was money. My father managed a regional distribution company, and my mother ran a small but profitable interior decorating business from a studio she kept in the back of the house. We weren't wealthy in the grand sense, but we weren't strapped. The difference between what Vanessa got and what I got was a choice. I just spent too many years explaining it away. The first time I understood something was off, I was 11 years old. Vanessa had broken my grandmother's antique jewelry box. It was one of those rose-painted lacquered ones with a tiny dancer inside, and it had belonged to my dad's mother, who had given it to me specifically before she passed. Vanessa knocked it off my dresser, and the lid cracked clean through. I heard it from the hallway. When I walked in, she was already composing her face into something innocent. When my mother arrived, Vanessa said I had left it on the edge on purpose, that I was always leaving my things in dangerous places. My mother looked at the box, looked at me, and said, "Clara, you know how careless you are." I didn't argue. I was 11. I didn't have the language for what had just happened yet. By the time I was a teenager, I had started to see the shape of it more clearly. Every shared household task defaulted to me. Vanessa loaded the dishwasher once a week if she felt like it. I did it every day, and the garbage, and the vacuuming, and the grocery runs once I had my license. My mother thanked Vanessa for the once-a-week dish loading. She never thanked me for the rest. Not once. The labor was just assumed to belong to me, like oxygen in a room, noticed only when it was gone. When I was 19 and starting community college, I had a part-time job at a pharmacy. I was covering my own books, my own gas, and quietly subsidizing some of the household groceries because my mother had mentioned twice that money was tight that fall. What I didn't know until later was that during that same fall, my mother had given Vanessa $400 to take a weekend trip to a music festival. When I mentioned once, carefully, that I had been helping with groceries and it had gotten difficult, my mother said, "Clara, Nobody asked you to do that." She said it the way you dismiss an invoice you didn't order. The symbolic object in our house was a corkboard in the kitchen hallway. My mother pinned things there. Vanessa's honor roll certificates, Vanessa's drama program bios, a photo from Vanessa's first professional headshot at 22. The board went from the top of the doorframe nearly to the floor. I had one thing on it, a thank you card from a neighbor whose dog I had looked after for a summer. My mother had pinned it there herself. She made a small ceremony of it at the time, said, "See, Clara, I celebrate you too." The card stayed on the corner of the board for 7 years. The worst part about growing up in that house wasn't being ignored. It was the performance of fairness. My mother was very good at producing occasional, visible moments of kindness toward me that she could point to later if questioned. She'd buy me something small, something she knew I wouldn't use, present it publicly, and then that gesture would function as credit for months of the other thing, the thing where I didn't matter. After college, I got a job doing administrative work for a property management company. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid steadily, and by 23, I had moved into a small apartment 20 minutes from my parents' house. Staying close felt like the right thing to do. My father was mostly absent in the soft sense. He worked long hours, deferred to my mother on family things, and had a habit of leaving rooms when the atmosphere turned sharp. He wasn't cruel. He was just absent in the ways that mattered. Once I was working and living independently, I became useful in a new way. My mother started calling me about things, not just talking, but needing. Could I pick up her dry cleaning because she had a client? Could I drive my grandmother to her eye appointment because Vanessa was busy? Could I look at her finances because something wasn't adding up in her business accounts and she trusted me with numbers? I always said yes. I'm not entirely sure why I kept saying yes. Partly because I thought it was what good daughters did. Partly because every time she needed me, she was warm to me in a way she wasn't when she didn't. It should have been a warning sign. That warmth arrived with requests and left after them. By the time I was 25, I had a stable job, a decent savings account, and a genuine belief that I had finally outrun the family dynamics that had shaped my childhood. I thought adult life would be different. I thought distance and usefulness would eventually translate into something that felt like real belonging. I was 26 when Vanessa got engaged. His name was Ryan Calloway. He was 31, worked in finance, and had a wide jaw and an easy confidence that my mother responded to like a plant responding to sunlight. She loved him immediately and publicly. Within a month of the engagement announcement, she was already referring to him as her son. She said it at the dinner table while I was passing the bread. She looked at him and said, "You're the son I always wanted." Nobody said anything. My father nodded. Vanessa beamed. I kept passing the bread. The engagement dinner was set for 8 months out. A proper venue, a proper guest list. My mother took over most of the planning because Vanessa let her and because letting her was easier. I was asked to help, not Vanessa's friends, not Ryan's family who had their own ideas and offered repeatedly. Me. I was asked to help with the vendor calls, the seating chart, the follow-up on RSVPs, the coordination with the florist when the florist had a miscommunication with the venue. I did it. I spent maybe 30 hours over 3 months on logistics for a party I would not be thanked at. I know it was 30 hours because I kept notes. Not because I was building a case. I wasn't. I kept them because I had a full-time job and I was managing event coordination as a second task, and I needed to track my own time so I could plan around it. I had no idea those notes would matter later. The engagement dinner was 7 months away when my mother first mentioned the safe. She brought it up the way she brought up most practical things, casually, in the middle of something else, as if it weren't important enough to deserve its own conversation. We were sitting in her kitchen on a Saturday afternoon. I had driven over to help her finalize the venue contract because the events coordinator kept sending documents with conflicting line items, and my mother didn't want to deal with it herself. She made tea. I sat at the table with my laptop and worked through the contract while she talked. She mentioned she'd been keeping cash in a small fireproof safe in her bedroom closet. Said she'd been building it up since my father's hospital scare 2 years earlier, a brief cardiac episode that turned out to be nothing serious but had shaken her enough to want liquidity on hand. She said she didn't trust banks the way she used to. Said it was just a cushion. Her word, a cushion. I didn't think about it much. It was her money, her business. I finished the venue contract, flagged 3 clauses she needed to initial, emailed it back to the coordinator, and drove home. What I didn't know was that Vanessa had also been in that kitchen recently, and that my mother had told Vanessa about the safe too. The difference was that my mother had also told Vanessa exactly what was in it. I wouldn't find that out for a long time. The first concrete thing that went wrong happened in month 4 of the planning. My mother called on a Wednesday evening, upset. Not the dramatic kind of upset she performed for effect, but genuinely rattled, which I recognized as different. She said the florist was refusing to honor the original quote. Apparently, there had been a verbal agreement about centerpiece pricing that the florist was now walking back. The new quote was $400 higher per table. With 14 tables, that was nearly $6,000 in unplanned cost. I told her I'd call the florist directly. She agreed quickly, which meant she was more relieved than she let on. I spent 2 hours on the phone over 2 days. The florist, a woman named Greta who ran a boutique floral studio out of a converted Victorian house on the east side of town, had a legitimate complaint. She had quoted based on a specific petal variety my mother had requested, and that variety had spiked in price due to a supply issue. The verbal agreement had been made before the pricing changed. Neither side had confirmed anything in writing. I worked out a compromise. We shifted 2 of the centerpiece designs to a slightly different variety that achieved the same aesthetic. Greta agreed to hold the original per-table price on the remaining 12 tables. The total additional cost came to $480 instead of nearly $6,000. My mother called Vanessa to share the good news. I heard about this later from Vanessa herself, who mentioned it casually in a text. Mom said she sorted out the florist issue, so we're good. I read that sentence 3 times. Mom said she sorted it, not a misunderstanding, not a memory failure, a deliberate reassignment of credit. I didn't say anything. I had been trained for years not to say anything. And honestly, I told myself it wasn't worth the friction. It was 1 phone call. It was just flowers. I let it go and kept working. But that was also the moment something shifted in me, quietly and without announcement. Some part of me started watching. 3 weeks after the florist situation, my mother asked me to help with the catering deposit. The venue had a preferred catering list, and the best-reviewed company on the list required a 30% deposit to hold the date. The total catering estimate was $22,000. The deposit was $6,600. My mother said she'd been a little stretched that month with a client project that had run over budget. She said she just needed the deposit covered for a few weeks, and she would pay me back before the dinner. She said Vanessa and Ryan were contributing to the catering overall, but their contribution was coming later, once Ryan got his year-end bonus. She used the word bridge. She said, "Clara, I just need a bridge." I had the money. I had been saving steadily, and my account was in good shape. And she had done the thing she did. She had been warm and direct and slightly vulnerable in the asking, which was the version of her I could never refuse. I transferred $6,600 from my savings to her account the following morning. I did not ask for anything in writing. I did not ask for a repayment timeline beyond before the dinner. I trusted her the way you trust someone you've spent your whole life trying to trust. That was my mistake. Not the only one, but that was the first one that cost me money. Over the next 6 weeks, 2 more things happened that I cataloged without fully understanding them yet. The first was that I ran into Ryan's mother, Barbara Calloway, at a coffee shop near my office. We had met twice before at family Gathner's, and she was a pleasant, direct woman who had clearly raised her son with some intentionality. We talked for about 10 minutes. At one point she said, pleasantly, "Your mother has been so wonderful throughout all of this planning. She told me you've been a huge help behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, I smiled and said something agreeable, but I sat with that phrase for the rest of the afternoon. Behind the scenes is what you call someone who is contributing but shouldn't be visible. It's what you call a stagehand, not a person. The second thing was smaller but stranger. My mother asked me to pick up a sealed envelope from her accountant's office and bring it to her directly. She said her accountant was a 40-minute drive from her and I was already on that side of town for work. I picked it up, drove it over, handed it to her. She took it without opening it in front of me, said thank you, tucked it under her arm, and went to her bedroom. I didn't think about it at the time. A sealed envelope from an accountant. It was probably a tax document. It probably meant nothing. I thought about it later, much later, when I understood what my mother had been managing quietly in the months before that dinner. The repayment she had promised for the $6,600 never came. The dinner was now 3 months away. I mentioned it once, carefully. She said she hadn't forgotten and that she would handle it before the event. She said it the way she said things that she had already decided she wasn't going to do, with total confidence, no specifics, the conversational equivalent of a closed door. I wrote it down. Not accusingly. Just the date, the amount, the promise made, the promise not kept. The same way I had been tracking my hours on the event logistics. Just notes. A habit of documentation that I had developed in my job and had apparently begun applying to my family without quite realizing what I was building. 2 months before the dinner, Vanessa stopped returning my calls. Not completely. She would text back occasionally, short replies, the kind that technically count as a response but don't actually communicate anything. So busy with fittings. Ryan's family is a lot. Talk soon. I assumed it was wedding stress. I had read enough about engaged women navigating large family events to know that the 2 months before a major celebration could compress a person's bandwidth down to almost nothing. I gave her space and kept working on the logistics. What I didn't know was that something had already been decided. Not about the wedding. About me. I found out about the first piece of it from a woman named Lorraine, who worked at the venue's front desk and had become friendly with me over months of coordination calls. Lorraine was efficient and slightly sardonic and had been in the events industry long enough to have seen most things. She called me one afternoon in early September to confirm a detail about the rehearsal setup, and at the end of the call she paused. She said, "Clara, I just want to mention something, and you can do whatever you want with it." I told her to go ahead. She said that my mother had called the venue the previous week and asked them to list her and Vanessa as the primary contacts going forward. She had told them that I had been helping temporarily but was no longer involved in the planning. She had asked them to redirect all future correspondence accordingly. I was still on the venue's contact sheet. Lorraine had noticed the discrepancy and wasn't sure whether it was a misunderstanding or intentional, so she was letting me know. I thanked her. I kept my voice even. I told her to leave me on the contact sheet for now and that I would sort out the communication question with my mother. I did not call my mother. Not yet. I sat with what Lorraine had told me and I let myself feel the shape of it. It wasn't just that I had been removed from the contact list. It was the language, no longer involved. That was a choice of words. That was a story being told about me to people outside the family. And the timing, it happened quietly while I was still doing the work. I kept doing the work for another 2 weeks. Not because I was naive, because I was watching. The seating chart was the next thing. I had put together a full draft after collecting RSVPs and cross-referencing family relationships on both sides to avoid the predictable landmines. Ryan's uncle and his former business partner had a known falling out. 2 of my mother's friends had a social rivalry that went back 15 years. I had taken all of it into account, arranged the tables with care, and sent the draft to my mother for review. She sent back a revised version 4 days later. 2 changes. The first was minor, a table number swap. The second was that she had moved me from table 4, a central table near the front, close to the head table where the immediate family would be seated, to table 11. There were 12 tables. Table 11 was near the kitchen corridor. It seated 8 people, mostly the older relatives from my father's side who my mother had never been close to and who existed in her world primarily as an obligation. My Aunt Patricia, who was 81 and slightly hard of hearing. 2 of my father's cousins from out of state who had not been to a family event in years. A neighbor my parents had been friendly with in the 90s who had since moved away. And 3 names I didn't recognize at all. I looked at that revised seating chart for a long time. I thought about table 4. I thought about what it meant to be near the head table versus near the kitchen corridor. I thought about the fact that in the original plan, table 4 had been where I would have been visible, where Ryan's family would have noticed me, where, at some point during the speeches and the toasting, the people who didn't know our family's internal architecture might have seen me and connected me to the work that had gone into the evening. That was exactly what my mother wanted to prevent. I confirmed the seating chart back to her without comment. Then I started keeping records more deliberately. I went back through my phone and my email and my bank transfers, and I reconstructed a clear, dated account of everything I had contributed over the previous 7 months. The 30-plus hours of coordination work, the florist negotiation, the $6,600 deposit that had never been repaid, the venue contract review, the RSVPs I had tracked, the 3-way email chains I had managed between the catering company and the venue when their preferred vendors had a scheduling conflict. I printed it out at work. Not neatly, not formatted like a legal document, just a plain list in chronological order, dates, actions, amounts. I folded it and put it in an envelope in my desk drawer at home. Then there was the phone call with my cousin Marielle. Marielle is on my father's side. She's 3 years younger than me, and we've always been close in the way that cousins can be close when they're both slightly outside the center of gravity of their own families. She called me on a Thursday night and said she'd heard something that she thought I should know. She had been on the phone with my Aunt Patricia, the 81-year-old who had been seated at table 11 with me, and my aunt had mentioned, almost in passing, that Diane had spoken to her about Clara recently. My mother had told my Aunt Patricia that I had been difficult during the planning process, that I had caused tension with vendors, that I had overstepped and tried to take control of things that weren't mine to manage. My Aunt Patricia had not questioned this. She had no reason to. My mother was credible to her. I was just the quieter daughter, the one who didn't call enough. I sat on my bed after Marielle's call and I understood what was happening. My mother was not just removing me from credit. She was doing something more deliberate. She was managing the narrative in advance. She was, before the dinner had even happened, establishing a version of events in which I was the difficult one, the one who had caused problems. She was planting that story in the people most likely to hear her version unopposed. She was getting ready to do something. I did not know what yet. But I understood now that whatever was coming at the dinner, it was not accidental. It was planned. She had been building toward something for months, and she had been building quietly, the way she did everything that mattered to her. The question was what? I started thinking about the safe. The answer came from an unlikely place. My mother's interior decorating business had a part-time bookkeeper named Sandra. Sandra had worked for my mother for about 6 years, came in twice a month to reconcile accounts, and was the kind of quiet professional presence that most small business owners treat as furniture. Reliable, invisible, not part of the family drama. Sandra called me on a Tuesday morning in October. I was at my desk at work and I almost didn't pick up because I didn't recognize the number. When she told me who she was, I stepped into the hallway. She said she was calling because she was uncomfortable and she needed to say something to someone and she didn't know who else to call. She said she had been thinking about it for 2 weeks and she had almost talked herself out of calling multiple times. I told her to take her time. Sandra said that at her last session reconciling my mother's business accounts, she had noticed a series of withdrawals from the business operating account that didn't correspond to any vendor invoice or expense category she had on file. The withdrawals were not enormous individually, between $400 and $900 each, but there were 11 of them, spread across 5 months, and they totaled just over $6,000. When she asked my mother about them, my mother said they were personal draws. Legitimate, legal, a business owner taking personal draws from an operating account is completely normal. Sandra had no grounds to push back, but she said the timing bothered her. And there was one other thing. She said my mother had recently asked her to prepare a summary of the business's current liabilities. Not the full books, just liabilities. And when Sandra had sent the summary, my mother had replied asking specifically which liabilities would be visible to an outside party in the event of a dispute. Sandra didn't know what dispute. She didn't know what outside party. But the question had struck her as specific in a way that generic financial curiosity wouldn't explain. I thanked her. I asked if she would be willing to put in writing what she had told me, not formally, not for any official purpose, just a personal note documenting what she'd observed. She said she would think about it. She said she'd email me. She emailed me 4 days later, 3 paragraphs, plain language, dated and signed. I printed it and put it in the envelope in my desk drawer with the other papers. That same week I drove past my parents' house on a Thursday evening. I wasn't planning to stop. I was on my way back from a grocery run and their street was on a route I sometimes took. I slowed out of habit and I saw Vanessa's car in the driveway. This wasn't unusual. Vanessa stopped by frequently. What was unusual was that the house was dark except for the light in my parents' bedroom, and my father's car was not there. He was traveling for work that week, I remembered. I had seen him mention it in a family group text. My mother and Vanessa were alone in the house. I kept driving, but the image stayed with me. The dark house, the one lit window, Vanessa's car, and my mother's bedroom where the safe was. The next morning I called my father's brother, my Uncle Gerald. Gerald is a straightforward man who has never been particularly close to my mother and has always treated me with uncomplicated kindness. I asked him carefully whether he had heard anything recently from the family about me, whether my mother had said anything. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She mentioned you'd been having some financial trouble, that you'd borrowed from her and been slow about paying it back." I had never borrowed a single dollar from my mother in my life. The $6,600 transfer had gone the other direction, from me to her. I asked him when she had said this. He said it had come up a few weeks ago at a birthday dinner for one of his grandchildren. He said it was mentioned almost in passing, the way she mentioned things she wanted to embed without appearing to try. I said, "Gerald, I need you to know that's not true. I haven't borrowed money from her. I lent her money. $6,600 for the catering deposit that she has not repaid." He didn't say much after that. He said he believed me. He said he was sorry she had said that. He sounded tired in the way people sound when they've been watching a difficult person operate for decades, and they're too far down the road to be surprised anymore. I drove to work that morning understanding something fully for the first time. My mother was not just planning to exclude me at the dinner. She was not just redistributing credit. She was constructing a specific story, one she had been planting for months in the people around me, a story in which I was a financial problem, a burden, someone who had taken from the family rather than given. She was building a case for something public, and the money in the safe I had heard about once and never thought about again, was going to be part of it. I didn't sleep well that week, not because I was panicking, but because my mind kept running the same sequence and arriving at the same conclusion. My mother had a safe with a significant amount of cash in it. She had been telling people I had financial problems and a habit of borrowing money I didn't repay. She had removed me from the vendor contacts and repositioned me as someone who had caused problems during the planning. She had seated me at the back of the room near the kitchen. She had told my Aunt Patricia I was difficult. Every single piece of that pointed in one direction. She was building a stage, and I was being placed on it in a specific role. I just didn't know the full script yet. I called my friend Dominic on a Friday night. Dominic and I had been close since our mid-20s. He was a paralegal at a civil litigation firm, not a lawyer, but someone who understood how evidence worked and how people constructed narratives in disputes. More importantly, he was someone who had met my mother exactly once, at a birthday dinner 5 years earlier, and had said to me on the drive home, quietly and without drama, "Clara, your mother is very careful about who is watching when she's kind to you." He had never said it again, but I had never forgotten it. I told him everything. The full sequence, from the safe mention to Sandra's call to what Gerald had told me. I talked for almost 40 minutes. He listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I value most about him. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What's in the safe?" I told him I didn't know exactly. My mother had mentioned it as a cash cushion. She hadn't given me a figure. He said, "She's going to accuse you of taking it." I had already thought this. Hearing it said out loud by someone else made it feel less like paranoia and more like a reasonable conclusion. I said I thought so too. He asked what I had documented. I told him about the printed list, Sandra's email, the notes on my hours. He said that was a start, but it was all outward-facing material, meaning it documented what I had contributed but not what she was planning. He said the problem with what she was planning was that it would happen in public, in front of people who had already been primed to believe her version. He said, "You need something that shows the truth about the safe from her side, not just your side." I thought about the dark house, the lit bedroom window, Vanessa's car in the driveway. I thought about what two people do alone in a house at night in a bedroom with a safe. I told Dominic what I was thinking. He was quiet again, longer this time. He said, "If you do that, you have to do it right. You have to know what's legal in your state. You have to make sure it captures what actually happens and not just circumstance. And you have to be prepared for the possibility that you see nothing useful and it still costs you something to have tried." I said I understood. He said, "I'm not telling you to do it. I'm telling you what you'd need if you did." The following Monday, I spent my lunch break researching recording laws for my state. Single-party consent applied to audio recordings of conversations I was part of. Video recording in a private residence was more complex. I read carefully. I read it twice. Then I called the number for a legal aid information line, explained a hypothetical scenario without identifying details, and confirmed what I understood about the relevant statute. What I was considering was technically within the law under a specific reading of the statute, given that the bedroom in question was in my parents' home, where I had a long-standing history of access, and had been explicitly invited to be present as recently as 6 weeks earlier when I had helped my mother with the venue contract at that same house. I was not placing a device in a stranger's home. I was placing one in a home where I had a documented presence, in a room I had entered as a guest with my mother's knowledge. I am not saying it was without risk. I am saying I was careful. I went to an electronics store and bought a small motion-activated camera, not a sophisticated device. The kind sold openly for home security purposes, marketed for use in nurseries and entry hallways, small enough to fit inside a decorative item. I brought it home and tested it 3 times. The harder part was finding a reason to be in my mother's bedroom. That opportunity came 8 days before the dinner. My mother called asking if I could come over and help her choose between 2 dress options for the event. This was the kind of request she made occasionally, the performance of including me in something personal as a demonstration of closeness. I said yes. Of course I said yes. I arrived on a Saturday morning. She had the 2 dresses laid out on the bed. We spent 20 minutes on the dresses, which she had already decided between and was simply seeking confirmation for. While she was in the bathroom trying on the second option, I placed the camera inside a small ceramic owl figurine that sat on the shelf above her dresser. It was part of a set of 3 decorative birds she had owned for years. I had dusted those birds myself more than once. The owl faced the room. The owl faced the closet. I adjusted the angle once, then sat back on the edge of the bed as she came out of the bathroom. She looked at the dress. I told her the first one was better. She agreed. She said I had good taste. I drove home with my hands steady on the wheel. I checked the camera feed that night from my phone. The angle was clear. The closet door was visible. The shelf where the safe sat behind the hanging clothes was just within frame if the door was open. It was enough. The camera ran for 6 days before it captured anything useful. I checked the feed every morning before work and every evening when I got home. Mostly it showed an empty bedroom, my mother making her bed, my father getting dressed, ordinary domestic footage that I fast-forwarded through without interest. I was not trying to surveil my parents' daily life. I was waiting for one specific thing. It happened on a Wednesday night, 9 days before the dinner. I opened the app at 11:15 after getting home late from a work event. The motion log showed activity at 8:47 p.m. I scrubbed to that timestamp. Vanessa came into the bedroom first. She didn't knock, just walked in with the easy ownership of someone who had never been told that room had boundaries. She was wearing a dark jacket and carrying a tote bag. She stood at the dresser for a moment, looked at herself in the mirror, adjusted her hair. My mother came in 30 seconds later and closed the door behind her. They talked for a moment. The camera had audio, but the room's acoustics were uneven and parts of the conversation were difficult to make out. I could hear tone more than words. They sounded easy with each other, comfortable, the way they always were when I wasn't in the room. Then my mother went to the closet. She pushed the hanging clothes to one side. She crouched down. She came up with the safe. It was smaller than I had imagined. Gunmetal gray, about the size of a shoebox. She set it on the bed and keyed in the combination. The door swung open. I could not see the interior clearly from the camera angle, but I could see my mother reach in and remove a stack of bills. She held it out toward Vanessa. Vanessa took it and put it directly into the tote bag without counting it. Then my mother reached in again and removed a second stack. This one she held for a moment, looked at, and then placed back inside. She closed the safe, keyed it shut, stood up. What happened next was what I had not anticipated and what changed everything. My mother laughed, not a polite social laugh, a loose, private, satisfied laugh that I had almost never heard from her in my direction. The kind of laugh that only comes out when someone feels completely safe and completely in control. Vanessa laughed too, a shorter sound, higher pitched. My mother said something, clear this time, close enough to the camera's range. She said, "She'll never see it coming." Vanessa said something back that I couldn't fully make out. 2 words, could have been "I know." Could have been something else. Then she picked up the tote bag, looped it over her shoulder, and they both left the room. I watched that 43-second clip 4 times before I put my phone down. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time without moving. The apartment was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside my window, a car passed slowly and its headlights moved across the ceiling in a long, pale stripe. I had been right. I had been completely right, and I had still hoped I was wrong. The next morning, I transferred the footage from the app to my phone's camera roll and then airdropped it to my laptop. I saved it in 2 places. I also plugged my phone into my laptop and created a local backup of the app's full motion log for the 6 days of recording, time-stamped, intact. I emailed the 43-second clip to a private email account I had created specifically for this purpose 2 weeks earlier, an account that existed on no device connected to my family. Then I called Dominic. He picked up on the second ring. I described what I had seen without editorializing, just the sequence. Woman enters room. Second woman enters. Safe opened. Cash transferred to bag. Safe closed. Laughter. The specific sentence. Dominic was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's not a setup for an accusation, that's the setup for a specific number." I asked him what he meant. He said, "She's not going to say you took some of the money, she's going to say you took all of it. She's going to say the safe is empty. That's why Vanessa took what was there, so that when she opens it in front of people it's empty and you're the only explanation she offers." I sat with that. It landed cleanly, the way true things do. He said, "How much do you think was in it?" I told him I didn't know. My mother had never given me a figure. I told him about the 6,000 in business draws Sandra had flagged, plus whatever other cash she had been accumulating. He said it could be anything. I said I knew. He said the next question was what I was going to do with the footage and when. I told him I wasn't going to do anything with it before the dinner. I said I thought that was important. If I confronted her privately, she would deny it, reframe it, and find a way to neutralize the footage before it could do anything real. Or she would simply move the accusation to a different arena. The damage she was planning to do was public. The response needed to be public too. Dominic said, "So you're going to let her make the accusation?" I said yes. He was quiet again. Then he said, "Clara, are you sure?" I told him I was sure. I told him I had spent 28 years absorbing things privately that happened publicly. I told him this time I wanted the room to see the truth in real time, not hear my version of it afterward. He didn't argue. He said, "Then be ready, and make sure your phone is fully charged." I checked the camera one more time that night. The bedroom was still. The owl sat on the shelf above the dresser, ceramic and patient, facing the room. I retrieved it the following Saturday under the same pretext as before, a quick visit to drop off a birthday card for my father. My mother was in the kitchen. I slipped into the bedroom, palmed the camera from the owl's hollow base, and was back in the hallway in under a minute. The device was returned. The footage was saved. The dinner was in 8 days. The 8 days before the dinner were the strangest of my life, not because anything dramatic happened during them, because nothing did. My mother called twice. Both times she was pleasant, practical, logistics-focused. Once to confirm I had received my revised invitation, which listed me formally as a guest rather than as someone involved in the planning. Once to ask if I was bringing anyone. I told her no. She said that was fine. Her voice was warm both times in that particular way it got when she was performing normalcy over something else entirely. I said everything appropriate. I confirmed I would be there. I asked if she needed anything. She said no, that everything was handled. I hung up each time and sat with the specific feeling of knowing something the other person doesn't know you know. It's not a comfortable feeling. It's also not a weak one. Dominic and I spoke 3 times that week. The first call was practical. He walked me through what I should and shouldn't say if the situation escalated to something involving law enforcement or legal counsel after the dinner. He said I wasn't obligated to explain my evidence in the moment. He said the footage spoke for itself and I should let it. He said my job in that room was to stay calm and play the clip. That was it. Everything else would follow from that. The second call was shorter. He had looked into the legal dimensions more carefully and he said the footage was solid. The context of my access to the home, the nature of the recording, the completeness of the timestamp chain, it was usable. Not in a court necessarily, not without proper legal counsel, but in the specific public arena where my mother planned to deploy her accusation, it was more than enough. The third call was the night before the dinner. He said, "How are you doing?" I said I was okay. He said, "You don't have to do this publicly if you don't want to. You could send her the footage privately before the dinner and let her cancel the whole thing." I told him that wasn't what I wanted. He said he understood. He said, "Then go in clean. No anger, just the footage." I spent some time that week thinking about Ryan's family. The Callaways. Barbara, who had called me a behind-the-scenes presence. Ryan's father, a quiet man named Thomas who I had met twice and who seemed decent. They were coming to this dinner believing it was a celebration. They were going to watch my mother accuse me of theft in front of 112 people, and they were going to believe it because they had no reason not to. I thought about that specifically. I thought about what it meant to let something happen in a room full of people who had no context. I thought about the groom's parents sitting at the head table, watching Diane cry into a microphone about her safe, and forming their first real impression of the family their son was marrying into based entirely on my mother's performance. That was the risk move Dominic had mentioned, the one I had to sit with honestly. By letting her make the accusation publicly, I was accepting that for some portion of the evening, some number of people in that room would believe it. I would be the accused. For however long it took me to respond, I decided I could live with that window, because the window was going to close. On the practical side, I did 3 things that week. I forwarded Sandra's email to my private account one more time, just to confirm the chain was intact. I printed a clean copy of my documented contributions, the hours, the deposit, the florist negotiation, and folded it into an envelope I tucked into my handbag. Not to wave around, just to have. A kind of physical confirmation that the paper trail existed and was real. And I wore the right dress. This sounds small. It wasn't entirely small. My mother had sent me a suggested dress code note 2 weeks earlier, understated elegance, neutral tones. Which I understood as, don't be visible. I bought a dark green dress instead, not flashy, not provocative, but a dress that said I am here, I am present, I am someone who chose her own clothes. I drove to the venue alone. It was a 40-minute drive on a clear October evening, and I made it without music, just the road and the sound of my own breathing and the occasional passing car. I parked in the outer lot. I sat for a moment with my hands in my lap. The venue was a converted estate property, long gravel driveway, lit entrance, the kind of place that had been designed to make events feel significant. I could see cars already filing in, guests in formal clothes moving toward the entrance in small clusters. I checked my phone. The clip was there. I had watched it that morning one final time, 43 seconds. Clear audio on the sentence that mattered, clear video of the cash transfer. I got out of the car. My mother was standing near the entrance with Vanessa when I came up the driveway. She saw me and her expression shifted through something quickly, something she smoothed over before it could be read. She smiled. She said I looked lovely. She touched my arm briefly, the performance of affection, and moved on to greet the next arriving guests. Vanessa didn't look at me at all. I found my seat at table 11. I set my handbag on the chair beside me. I ordered water from the passing server, and I sat quietly while the room filled in around me. The floral centerpieces were exactly what I had negotiated with Greta. They were beautiful. Nobody in that room knew that. By 7:30, the room was full. 112 people. The clink of glassware, the low, warm hum of a large gathering in a well-lit room. The head table was radiant, Ryan and Vanessa side by side, Barbara and Thomas Calloway across from my mother, who was seated at the center of everything in a dove-gray dress and a practiced smile. The microphone stood waiting near the head table. My phone sat face up on the table in front of me, screen dark, volume on. I had done everything I could do. The rest was hers to begin. The dinner ran the way these things run. Appetizers, introductions, the coordinated warmth of people performing their best selves for an audience. Ryan's father gave a short toast early in the evening, understated and genuine, the kind of toast that makes you like a person immediately. Barbara Calloway raised her glass and looked at Vanessa with real affection. A few of Ryan's friends called out from their table, and the room laughed easily. I ate my appetizer. I watched the room. I kept my phone face up and my expression neutral. My mother waited until the main course had been cleared. This was deliberate. I understood that in the moment. She waited until the plates were gone and the room had settled into that relaxed post-meal looseness where people feel warm and full and slightly lowered in their guard. She waited until the servers had retreated to the periphery and the ambient noise had dropped to a comfortable murmur. She had thought about the timing. She had chosen it carefully. She stood and reached for the microphone. The room quieted naturally, the way rooms do when someone at the head table stands with intent. A few people tapped their glasses. Someone near the back called out something encouraging. My mother smiled at the room with the full warmth she kept for public occasions, and she began. She thanked the venue. She thanked the catering staff. She talked about Ryan for 2 minutes in glowing terms that were clearly designed to land well with his family. And they did. Barbara Calloway was nodding, smiling, visibly pleased. My mother had done her homework on what the Calloways valued. She was precise about it. Then she talked about Vanessa. The beautiful daughter, the accomplished daughter, the daughter who had always known what she wanted and gone after it. She said she was proud beyond words. Her voice caught slightly on the word proud in a way that read as genuine emotion, but that I recognized as a technique. She had a talent for locating the emotional register of a room and matching it. I watched her. My hands were flat on the table. My breathing was even. Under the table, my right hand was resting beside my phone. She said she wanted to take a moment to address something that had been weighing on her. She said she believed in honesty, in family honesty specifically, and that she couldn't stand up in front of the people she loved most without being truthful about something painful. The room stilled. I picked up my phone. She turned her head, not toward me directly, not yet. She looked at Ryan's parents first. A strategic choice. She was establishing her audience before she named her target. She said that in the weeks leading up to this celebration, she had discovered that money had gone missing from her home. A significant amount. Money she had been carefully saving. Thomas Calloway set down his wine glass. She said the amount was $74,200. The number landed in the room like something dropped from a height. I heard a sharp intake of breath from somewhere to my left. I heard the specific sound of Barbara Calloway's fork touching her china plate, not set down gently, dropped. The woman at the table nearest me stopped mid-sentence and didn't finish it. My mother's voice had taken on a particular quality now. The texture of grief performing itself. She said it had taken her weeks to accept what the evidence pointed to. She said she had gone back and forth, had told herself there had to be another explanation. She said she had wanted to be wrong. Then she looked directly at me. She said my name. Clara. Into the microphone, in a room of 112 people, with Ryan's family at the head table, and the florist's centerpieces on every surface, and the corkboard in her hallway 7 months of work away. She said, she stole $74,200 from my safe. The ballroom went completely silent. I felt the room turn, not metaphorically. Physically, the shift of bodies, the reorientation of attention, heads moving, eyes finding me. Table 11 near the kitchen corridor, the woman in the dark green dress, the one who had been seated away from the center of things. I did not look away from my mother. I did not stand up. I did not raise my voice. I did not do any of the things a guilty person does when they're cornered, the defensiveness, the volume, the immediate scramble to explain. I sat still and I looked at her with an expression I had been practicing for 8 days without knowing I was practicing it. Calm, steady, waiting. My mother interpreted my stillness as shock. I could see it in the slight relaxation of her shoulders, the micro-adjustment of her posture. She thought she had landed the blow and I was absorbing it. She thought the silence was mine. She said, I have tried to protect her. I have tried to give her every opportunity to come to me and make it right. But $74,200 does not disappear, and I will not stand here and pretend I don't know what happened to it. Someone at a table near the front made a sound. Low, sympathetic. My mother's performance was working. She was credible. She had been building toward this for months, and she had done it well. Then I stood up. Not dramatically. I pushed my chair back, and I stood the way you stand when you're about to say something practical. I held up my phone with the screen facing me and I said, clearly, in a voice that carried without needing to be raised, before anyone responds to that, I'd like to show you something. My mother's expression changed. It was the first genuine expression I had seen from her all evening, and it lasted less than a second before she covered it. But it was there. A flash of something she had not prepared for. Not fear exactly. Recalculation. She said, Clara, this is not the time, I said. It won't take long. Ryan was watching me from the head table. His face was careful and unreadable. Vanessa had gone completely still. She was looking at the centerpiece in front of her with a focused attention that people give to inanimate objects when they are trying very hard not to look at a specific person. I connected my phone to the venue's Bluetooth speaker. I had confirmed the venue used a standard Bluetooth system during my coordination calls with Lorraine 3 months earlier. I had paired my phone to it in the first 20 minutes of arriving that evening, when the room was still filling in and nobody was watching the woman at table 11 fiddling with her settings. The audio connected. I pressed play. The room heard it before they saw it because sound carried faster. My mother's bedroom. The ambient quiet of a private space. Then footsteps. Then the specific metallic sound of a safe being opened. I turned my phone screen outward so the table nearest me could see. I moved it slowly, not theatrically, in a small arc so the people at the adjacent tables could see too. The footage was 43 seconds. It was clear. HD. Time-stamped in the corner of the frame. Vanessa entering the room first. My mother following. The closet door opening. The safe coming out. The cash being placed into the tote bag. My mother's laugh. And then, clear as anything, my mother's voice through the speaker system of a room that had been chosen for its acoustics. She'll never see it coming. The silence that followed was different from the silence after the accusation. The accusation silence had been shocked and sympathetic. This silence was the sound of a room revising everything it had understood in the last 4 minutes. Barbara Calloway stood up. She didn't say anything. She just stood the way people stand when they need to be vertical to process something, and she looked at my mother with an expression I will not try to describe because I don't think I have the words for it. Thomas Calloway put his hand flat on the table. A woman 2 tables back said, quietly but audibly, "Oh my God." My mother said, "That footage is," and stopped. She tried again. "You have no idea what context," and stopped again. The microphone was still in her hand, and the feedback of her own fragmented sentences was coming through the speaker system and filling the room with the sound of her losing the thread. Vanessa pushed her chair back. The legs scraped against the floor, a harsh sound in the silence. She stood up and she looked at Ryan, and her face had collapsed into something that was trying to be dignified and wasn't managing it. Ryan was looking at the phone in my hand. He had not moved. His jaw was set, and his eyes were moving between me and his mother and Vanessa in a rapid sequence that I recognized as someone doing rapid internal accounting. My mother found her footing again. It took her about 15 seconds, which felt longer. She said, "This is not what it looks like. That money was being moved for safekeeping. Clara knew about it. This is completely distorted." Lorraine, the venue coordinator, had appeared at the edge of the room near the service entrance. She was standing very still with her hands clasped in front of her. She was looking at me, and her expression was steady and not surprised. Gerald, my father's brother, was at a table near the middle of the room. He was one of the people from my father's side who had actually been given a reasonable table. He had been sitting quietly through all of it. Now he turned in his chair and looked at my mother for a long moment and then looked away, toward the window, and did not look back. My father was at the head table. He had gone the color of old paper. He was staring at the phone in my hand as though he was trying to understand what century he was in. I don't think he had known. That is the most charitable reading, and I think it is the accurate one. His hands were in his lap and he was completely still. Ryan said, "Mom," not to my mother, to Barbara. Barbara Calloway was still standing. She looked at her son, and something passed between them that I wasn't part of. Then she looked at Vanessa. Then she sat back down and picked up her wine glass and set it down again without drinking from it. Ryan reached into the breast pocket of his jacket. He took out a small velvet box, the kind that holds a ring. He set it on the table in front of him with a sound that was very soft and very final, and he did not pick it up again. Vanessa made a sound. Not a word, just a sound. My mother tried once more. She lowered the microphone slightly and spoke directly to the room in a tone that was attempting to recover authority. She said that this was a private family matter and that the footage had been taken illegally and that she intended to speak with a lawyer. Nobody responded to that. Nobody moved toward her or murmured agreement or offered her the social lifeline that a room gives to someone they believe. The room had simply recalibrated, and the new calibration did not include a version of events in which my mother was the injured party. A woman at table 7, one of my mother's longtime friends, a woman named Patris who had known her for 20 years, picked up her handbag from the floor and placed it on her lap. She did not stand. She did not leave. But she picked up her handbag and placed it on her lap in the specific way that people do when they are preparing to no longer be somewhere. Sandra had not been at the dinner. She was not a family friend or a vendor guest, but her 3-paragraph email was in my handbag in the envelope, and I had known since Wednesday night that I might not need it. I did not need it. I sat back down. I placed my phone face down on the table. I picked up my water glass and I drank from it, and I set it back on the white linen, and I looked at the centerpiece in front of me, the one Greta had made with the substituted petal variety that nobody in the room knew I had negotiated. The dinner did not resume. People began to move in the slow, uncertain way that people move when an event has ended without officially ending. Servers appeared and disappeared. Somewhere near the entrance a woman was crying, though I didn't look to see who. Conversations started in low voices at various tables and stopped again, the hush and restart of people who did not know what register the moment required. Ryan's ring stayed on the table. The immediate aftermath was quieter than I expected. Ryan and his parents left within 20 minutes of the clip playing. Barbara stopped beside me on her way out. She didn't say much. She put her hand briefly on my shoulder and said, "I'm sorry this happened to you." I thanked her. She nodded once and walked toward the exit with Thomas at her side and Ryan behind them, the ring still on the table where he had left it. My mother left through a side door. I didn't see her go. I heard later from Gerald that she had asked the venue manager to call her a car. Vanessa left at roughly the same time, separately. I don't know if they spoke before they left. I don't know what they said to each other that night or in the days that followed. That part of the story belongs to them. My father found me near the coat check as the room was emptying. He looked like a man who had aged a decade in 2 hours. He said my name and then stopped and couldn't seem to find what came after it. I told him it was okay, which wasn't entirely true, but was the only thing I had available in that moment. He nodded slowly and went to get his coat. In the weeks that followed, my mother did consult a lawyer. The lawyer apparently told her what Dominic had already told me, that the footage, given the circumstances of its recording, was not going to be her best avenue. There was no formal legal action. There was also no apology. The $6,600 was repaid, not by my mother directly. My father transferred it to my account 10 days after the dinner with a note that said only reimbursement. No context, no additional words. I accepted it. The engagement did not recover. Ryan and Vanessa were officially over within 3 weeks. I heard about it from Marielle, who heard it from my Aunt Patricia, who had been at table 11 with me that night, and who apparently told everyone she spoke to afterward that she had always thought something was off. Memory is a flexible thing. I don't have a relationship with my mother now. That's not a dramatic statement. It's just the current fact. We have not spoken since the dinner. I have not tried to force a conversation and she has not reached out. Some doors close and the closing is the whole story. Vanessa called me once about 2 months after. I let it go to voicemail. She said she was sorry, that she hadn't understood how far it would go, that she had been following our mother's lead her whole life and hadn't stopped to think about what that meant for me. It was a genuine message. I listened to it twice. I haven't called back. I might eventually. I don't know yet. What I do know is this. I live in a small apartment with good light and a kitchen I have rearranged twice because it's mine to rearrange. I have a job I'm good at and a friend named Dominic who answers on the second ring. On weekends sometimes I drive out to the estate property and park in the outer lot for no reason in particular, just to sit somewhere quiet. Last spring I got a card in the mail from Barbara Calloway. No occasion, no explanation. Inside it said simply, "Thinking of you. You handled yourself with a lot of grace." I put it on my refrigerator with a magnet. It's still there. If you've ever been the person in your family who holds things together while being told you're the problem, I think you already know what this story cost before it cost anything. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if any part of this landed for you. There's another story coming that I think you'll want to hear. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this might be the one that makes you.